Shalom. Today we're going to be discussing the Davidic Covenant. This is a teaching in a series of the covenants, starting with the Adamic Covenant, going to the Noah Covenant, going to the Mosaic Covenant, and to the Davidic Covenant. These covenants are important because as we step back into who we are, we have to realize and we have to go back to the promises that he made to us. We have to go back to those covenants. And, we have to look at those details of those covenants. And as we return back to him as his people, then we will start to realize those blessings that are attached to the covenants. We've already had the curses that have been attached to the covenants, and it's time for us as a people to start to embrace those blessings that are attached to the covenants. So we're going to talk about the Davidic Covenant, and we're going to talk about how that applies to Israel today, how it applies to our lives, and how it applies to the awakening, and how it applies to our future as Israel. All right. So we're going to start in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 1. 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 1. And it reads, "And it came to pass, when the king sat in his house, and the Lord had given him rest around about from all of his enemies." All right, so Yah had given David rest from his enemies. David was in his house, okay, and Yah had given him rest. Now, when we look at that word rest, you would expect to find the word shalom there. But let's take a look at what word is used for rest. Okay. All right, we're looking at the word, and we're going to scroll down a little bit. Okay. So the word for rest is nawak. All right, it's H5117. And when we click on that word, we find that it means rest or ceased, confederate, let down, set down, lay, quiet, to remain, or to set. So when you look at the context of the way this word is used as rest, when it says that he was giving rest, that means that the Most High gave him rest or caused rest to be upon the land. So he caused rest. He caused it. Okay, so that's what the difference between this word and shalom is. This is the cause rest. So it's something that the Most High did to cause rest in the land. Okay, let's go back. All right, verse 2. That the king said unto Nathan the prophet, "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of Yah dwelleth within curtains." All right, so David's talking about that he has this beautiful house built of cedar. And when he looks around and he looks at the tabernacle that the ark of Yah is dwelling in, he just sees that it's covered by curtains. And he's making a comparison that, his house and the house of Yah. He's making that comparison. Well, like, why do I have this when Yah is dwelling in this temporary house? Okay. Verse 3. Nathan said to the king, "Go, do all that is in thy heart, for Yah is with thee." All right, so Nathan told him, go build the house. So Nathan initially told him to go build the house. What do we notice here? We notice here that Nathan didn't actually consult with the Most High at this point. So Nathan, basically told him, go build the house. Go do what you want to do. The Most High is with you. Let's find out what happens to Nathan. And it came to pass, this is verse 4, and it came to pass that night that the word of the Lord came unto Nathan, saying, that's verse 4, verse 5, "Go and tell my servant David, thus saith Yahuwah, shalt thou build me a house to dwell in?" So he asks a question: are you going to build me a house to dwell in? Okay, let's look at verse 6. Whereas I have not dwelled in any house since the time that I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt, even to this day, but I have walked in a tent and in a tabernacle. So the Most High is saying, wait a minute, wait. David wants to build me this house, but since the time that we came out of Egypt, I haven't dwelled in a house since in that time. Okay, so he's telling them, like, why now? Why now? You want to build me this house, but I haven't dwelt in a more permanent place since we came out of Egypt. So, the Most High is asking questions of David. David wants to do this thing, and it's in David's heart to do this thing, but the Most High has some questions about it. And now Nathan is getting these instructions from the Most High after he said to David, "Oh, go do what's in your heart." So Nathan is going to have to come to David, and he's going to have to tell him what was revealed to him from the Most High. Okay. Now, if we turn into Exodus 33:7, let's just go there real quick. Exodus 33:7. Okay. I want to hit this real quick, because this is confirmation of what the Most High was talking about when they left Egypt and how he dwelt with them. Let's look at 33:7. Exodus 33:7. And Moshe took the tabernacle and pitched it without the camp, afar off from the camp. And he called it the tabernacle of the congregation. And it came to pass that everyone which sought Yahuwah went out unto the tabernacle of the congregation, which was without the camp. So when the Most High says to him that he hasn't dwelt in a place since they were in Egypt, he's talking about the tabernacle that Moshe had pitched for him that was outside of the camp. Because let's look at what he says. Look at verse 7. Let's look at back to 2 Samuel 2 Samuel 7, verse 7. In all the places wherein I have walked with all of the children of Israel, spake I a word with any of the tribes of Israel, whom I commanded to feed my people Israel, saying, why build ye not me a house of cedar? So Most High is saying, when Moses pitched that tabernacle for me outside of the camp, and anyone that came to me, I spoke to, why didn't you build a house at that time? Why didn't you build me a house at that time? And let's just go back to Exodus 33 for confirmation to see if that is, in fact, what he's speaking about. If you go to 33:8, and it came to pass when Moses went out unto the tabernacle that all the people rose up and stood, every man at his tent door, and looked after Moses until he was gone into the tabernacle. Let's go to verse 9. And it came to pass, as Moshe entered into the tabernacle, that the cloudy pillar descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and Yahuwah talked with Moses. So his presence dwelled in that place. So the Most High is saying to them, when you saw my presence dwelling in that place, and then I talked to all of the people, why didn't you come to me? Let's look at verse 10. And all of the people saw the cloudy pillar stand at the tabernacle door. And all the people rose up and worshiped, every man in his tent door. Okay. And then let's go to verse 11. And the Lord spake unto Moses face to face, as a man speaketh to his friend. And he turned again into the camp, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, departed not out of the tabernacle. All right, so the Most High is saying, when I dwelt with you, when my presence was dwelling with you, when we left Egypt and Moses pitched this tabernacle for me, why didn't you build me a house at that point? Okay. All right. So we're back to 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel 7:8. Now therefore, so shalt thou say unto my servant David, thus saith Yahuwah Tessavat, I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel. So the Most High just reminded him where he brought David. He's saying, I brought you from, you were tending the sheep. If you remember, when Samuel came to anoint him, David wasn't even there. And he was like, do you have any more sons? And he was like, yeah, David, he's out tending the sheep. So David was out tending the sheep, and that's where he's saying the Most High reminded him where he brought him from. Verse 9. And I was with thee whatsoever thou wentest, and have cut off all thine enemies out of thy sight, and have made thee a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. So he's telling him, I took you from this place, from these small beginnings, I took you from this place, and I made your name great. Okay? You did whatever you wanted to do. David talks about killing the bear. He talks about killing the lion. He did those things because the Most High was with him that whole time. All right. 2 Samuel 7:10. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own, and move no more. Neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more, as before time. So now the Most High is saying, you want to build me a house, but what I'm going to in fact do, I'm going to build you a permanent place. Okay? You want to build me a permanent place, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to build you a permanent place. So this is where we start to get into the promise. We start to get into the covenant that he promised David. We start to get into those things that he promised to the house of David. Remember, David is part of the house of Judah, but there's a specific promise for the house of David. And this is what we're getting into. We're getting into that promise that he has for the house of David. So he has a promise for Judah. He has a promise for Israel, but he has a specific purpose and a promise that he put out there for the house of David and the heirs that were to follow. Okay? So let's read 2 Samuel 7:10 again. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, a land, a place. So he's going to appoint a place, okay? And will plant them. So he's going to put them in that place, that they may dwell in a place of their own. It'll be a place of their own, and move no more. So that will be the final time we will move. We won't have to move anymore. That will be the place where he plants us, where we were supposed to be from the beginning, the place that he will plant us. He'll keep us in that place. And then we won't have to move anymore. Now, he talks about this. He's going to give us what? Rest. He says, neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more, as before time. So he's talking about the time that he puts us back into the land. He plants us there. We're not moving anymore. And the important thing is, what is he going to give us? He's going to give us rest. He's giving us rest from who? He's given us rest from our enemies. Okay, he's given us rest from our enemies. So now, at this point, we don't have to worry about anything at this point. Okay, we don't have to worry about anything. This is, if you want to look at this in terms of prophecy, okay, this looks like the millennial kingdom. This looks like the Shabbat, the 1,000-year Shabbat that we're given. The time of peace, where we don't have to worry about tribes, other nations, other peoples. We don't have to worry about any of those things because he's given us rest from those things. Okay, and at that point, when he gives us that rest, we don't have to, there's nothing to fear at that point. Okay. So this is the first part of the covenant. First part of the covenant that he makes with David, that he's saying that, first of all, I'm going to take Israel and I'm going to put Israel, I'm going to plant them in that place. And when you plant someone in that place, they grow in that place. And then they're going to dwell in their place and they are not going to have to move anymore. Okay. And since they don't have to move anymore, I'm going to give you rest from your enemies. Okay. Let's look at verse 11. And as since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies, also Yahuwah telleth thee that he will make thee a house. So he says to David, listen, when I plant Israel, I'm going to put them in this place. I'm going to plant them. There's not going to be any enemies coming against you, but moreover, I am going to make a house for you. This is where the promise turns from Israel as a nation to the house of David. He's saying that I'm going to build you a house. I'm going to build you a house. You wanted to build me a house? I'm going to build you a permanent house. And when we look at that house, let's take a look. Let's take a look at 2 Samuel. Okay. Let's take a look at the word house. Okay. Ayeth. It's H1004. Okay. And it's a house, a home, household within, temple, could be prison, could be place, families, dungeons, miscellaneous. So it's a dwelling place, a habitation. So what he's saying to David is he's going to make David a habitation within that land. He's going to build him a strong house, a permanent house in the land. He's going to build David a permanent house. And remember, David desired to build the Most High a house. But the Most High said, no. First of all, you should have built me a house when you saw my presence dwelling with you when you left Egypt. You didn't do that. That's fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to build thee a house. Let's look at verse 12. 2 Samuel 7:12. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. All right, so now this is an interesting script. This script is very interesting because this scripture can go a few different ways. So let's take a look at it. He says, and when thy days be fulfilled, so when David's life is over, when David's life is coming to an end, and then you go to sleep with your father, so it means when David, finally dies, I will set up thy seed after thee, okay, which shall proceed out of thy bowels. So we know immediately out of David's bowels sprung Solomon, and I will establish his kingdom. So now, David's son Solomon, he was able to reap the benefits of what this promise that the Most High made to David. Okay? Solomon had a kingdom, and for a large part of that time, there was peace. There was no war. There was, it was shalom. And that is a precursor to what the Most High wants to do for us. That's a precursor of what the Most High had promised David. Okay. So, we know that he had peace during that time. We know that he had the full kingdom. He had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. So this was before, that the kingdoms had split, due to Solomon's transgressions. But, prior to that, he gave Solomon the whole kingdom. All right. And Solomon didn't have to war for the kingdom. He didn't have to fight. He didn't have to shed any blood. He didn't have to do any of those things because the kingdom was given to him in totality. Okay, so there was nothing that Solomon had to do to fight for that kingdom. The kingdom was already given to him. And we know what happens to Solomon later, but initially, that's how it went down with Solomon. Let's turn to 1 Kings 10:24. I wanna. Okay, let's go. First Kings. Kings 10. All right, let's go down. Okay. Okay. So Solomon had his encounter with the king or the queen of Sheba, and so this is just showing you some of the blessings that Solomon was able to realize because of this promise. 1 Kings 10:23. Let's start at 23. So King Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth for riches and for wisdom. So he was richer and wiser than all of the kings of the earth. Okay. And all the earth sought to Solomon to hear his wisdom, which Yah had put in his heart. So they came from everywhere to hear. That's verse 24 of Solomon's wisdom. And they brought every man his present, vessels of silver, vessels of gold, and garments, and armor, and spices, horses, and mules, at a rate year by year. So they brought Solomon all of these riches and all of these things and all of this tribute. The whole earth was paying tribute to Solomon at this time. This is the realization of that promise that he promised his father David. Let's look at verse 26. And Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the cities for chariots, and with the king at Jerusalem. Okay, and the king, or verse 27, and the king made silver to be in Jerusalem as stones, and cedars made he to be as the sycamore trees that are in the vale for abundance. So it talks about his riches and how much excess he had. Um, and how much the Most High blessed him and honored him based on that. Because remember, what does the promise say? Let's go back. Let's go back to 2 Samuel. The promise says, um, verse 12, and when thy days be fulfilled, that's David, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, okay, Solomon, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, which he did, and I will establish his kingdom. But watch what happens next. This is interesting what happens next. Now, some people would say that these two verses 12 and 7:12 and 7:13 go together, and some people would say they're separate because they're separate prophecies. Let's take a look at them. He shall build a house for my name. And we know Solomon built a house for his name. But watch this. And I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Now, we know there was an end to Solomon's kingdom. We know that there was an end to Solomon's kingdom. So, there's two ways that we could go about looking at these two scriptures, 2 Samuel 7:12 and 2 Samuel 7:13. We can look at these two scriptures in one of two ways. The first way is we could say that Solomon fulfilled part of it and the Messiah is going to fill the rest of it. Okay, so we could say that these two scriptures, or there's a dual fulfillment of these scriptures. All right, that Solomon fulfilled the part of coming out of his bowels and establishing the kingdom and building the house. But the throne will be established forever with the Messiah. So that's one way we can go at these two scriptures. The other way we can go at these two scriptures is this. And, depending on where you stand, because I know that this could be a dispute back and forth, depending on where you stand. The other way that you could say is this is all the Messiah. Okay? That this whole thing, verse 12 and verse 13, was fulfilled by the Messiah. Now, if you go there and that's your position on this, then you would say that the Messiah had to come out of David's bowels. Okay? That's what you would have to say. You would have to say that the Messiah came out of David's bowels, meaning that Joseph would have to be the Messiah's biological father. Okay? So, like I said, there's two ways you can go at this script. And like I said, depending on your position, is going to kind of dictate how you look at these two scripts. Now that it's not that this is important, but you see the new paragraph mark here in verse 12, meaning that this is the beginning of a thought, and the thought doesn't end until verse 17. So, the people that actually, separated this into different verses believed that from verse 12 all the way to verse 17 was one thought. Okay, so I don't know if that sways you either way. But with that being said, when you look at these scriptures, you have to either look, those are the kind of the two different ways that you go. The dual fulfillment, that Solomon fulfilled part and the Messiah is going to fulfill the second part, or you look at it as the Messiah filled it all. Because the part that we know that didn't happen was his kingdom wasn't established forever. Solomon's kingdom wasn't established forever. Solomon's kingdom came to an end. Okay. All right. Let's look at 2 Samuel 7:14. And remember, this is part of that same thought. So we're into that promise. So he says that he's going to take his seed that proceeds out of his bowels. He's going to establish the kingdom with that seed. He's going to build him a house. Okay. And he'll establish his throne forever. Okay. And that person that he chooses, that seed, will build the Most High a house. All right, let's look at 14. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. Now here we go. If we're saying all of these verses from 12 to 17 are the Messiah, then verse 14 says, I will be his father and he shall be my son. But if he commit iniquity, that's interesting. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. If we say that this is Solomon, this makes sense, because what happened to Solomon? The kingdom got ripped from his hands and it got split from his hands, where he only had the two tribes. All right. So it makes sense that he would chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. Now, if we're saying all of this is the Messiah, the part of committing iniquity, we know that the Messiah didn't commit any iniquity. All right. And he didn't need to be chastened by the rod of men because he didn't commit iniquity, but he received that punishment for the sins that we committed. Okay. So it's another interesting scripture. So based on where you're at and your viewpoint, it's another scripture that kind of, is part of the promise. All right. So good part of the promise is that he's going to establish his kingdom and all of those things. And then the part of the promise is when you get out of line, I'm going to chastise you with the rod of men. Okay? I'm going to chastise you with the rod of men. All right, let's look at verse 15. But my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee. All right, so he's saying, even in my chastisement, I'm not going to take away my mercy from that person. The mercy is still going to rest on him. Okay? My mercy is still going to rest on him, even though he may be doing those things that I never ordained for him to do. And, so, if we go to, let's just go and I want to hit something. I want to hit something that talks of in verse 7:14, where it talks about being his seed being chastised by the rod of men. I want to go to 1 Kings 11. 1 Kings 11. Let's take a look at 1 Kings 11. And we're going to go down to verse 25. All right, let's look at 25. All right, let's go up to 23. And God stirred up another adversary, Rezon, the king of Eladah, which fled from his lord Hadazer, king of Zobath. And he gathered men unto them and became captain over a band, when David slew them of Zobath. And they went to Damascus and dwelt therein, and reigned in Damascus. Let's look at verse 25. And he was an adversary to Israel all the days of Solomon, beside the mischief that Hadad did, and he abhorred Israel and reigned over Syria. So when he talked about his seed, if his seed committed iniquity, that he would chastise them with the rod of men. Here you go. Here's the rod of men coming up against Solomon to chastise him. Okay? Here's the rod of men. Here's one of the rod of men that the Most High allowed to come against Solomon. Okay? So you see not only the prophecy, you see the fulfillment in Solomon's life. Okay? All right. So he's not going to let the mercy depart from him, okay? So even though he's chastising Solomon, right? He's not going to, his mercy's still going to rest upon Solomon. Okay? His mercy is still going to rest upon Solomon. Okay? Where do I want to go now? Okay, so let's go to verse 16. This is 2 Samuel 7:16. In thy house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. All right, so the Most High is reiterating that the house of David, remember, this is specific. This is not Judah. This is house of David. Because remember, house of Judah is larger, right? House of David is a house within the house of Judah. So he's talking specifically to David's house, saying that your house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. thy throne shall be established forever. Okay, so he's telling David that David's throne is going to be established forever in the land, or in the land that he shows us or gives us. Okay, um, so when we look at prophecy for Judah, this prophecy that he gives specifically to David is in addition to the prophecy that he had for Judah. Okay, and that in order these people that took are able to realize this prophecy come from the lineage of David. Okay, they come from the lineage of David. Okay, and let's look at 17. According to all these words, and according to all his vision, so did Nathan speak unto David. All right, so Nathan said all these things. So we look at the covenant that Nathan, or that the Most High made with David. Let's go back, because I just want to make sure when we look at the covenant that we know the aspects of all of the covenant. Okay? All right, so let's start at verse 10. No, let's start at verse. All right, let's start at verse 9. All right, so he talks about where he brought David from. He talks about how he made David's name great. And then he goes, I'll appoint a place for my people Israel. So, same promise. He gave the promise to Adam. What did he tell Adam? He told Adam that to subdue, take dominion over everything. Same promise that he's making here. He'll appoint a place. So he's going to plant Israel there. He made the promise to Noah. What did he tell Noah? Be fruitful and multiply. So Noah's seed spread out. Okay? Subdue the land. Same thing. It's the same promise. What did he tell Moshe? Moshe, that I would bring you into a land. I would bring you into the land of Canaan, the land flowing with milk and honey. So that same promise is carrying through. And then he tells David the same thing, that he's going to bring Israel into the land. Now, Israel's, for the most part at this point, Israel's coming back into the land. They're in the land, they're taking over at this point. Okay? They don't have everything established at this point, but by the time we get to Solomon, they're in the land at that point. Okay? All of Israel is in the land at that point. All right. Let's take a look. Let's see. All right. So he's going to appoint a place for Israel. He's going to plant them. They're going to have a place of their own. They're not going to move anymore. And he's going to give them rest from those people that afflict them. The difference between his last rest and them being in the land at previous times, he's going to give them rest from all of the wicked. Because remember, even when Joshua brought them into the land, they had to fight, and there were always people around them that were, they were having battles with, going back and forth with. Then if you fast forward a little bit to Judges, same thing. They lost some ground in the land, and they had to fight these battles to maintain the land. In David's day, we know that David fought many, 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 many battles to establish the land, to maintain the land, and to expand in the land. Okay, and then so at those times they were in the land, but there was a lot of fighting going on. Then you get to the time of Solomon, and there was a great amount of time where Solomon experienced peace. So if you ask me, that script is partly fulfilled with Solomon, but I would say the Messiah brings that forth through the forever promise. All right, Solomon wasn't able to take us to the forever promise. The forever promise has to come through the Messiah. All right, so that was verse 10. Verse 11, rest from your enemies, and that he tells David he's going to make him a house. So the house of David, I'm going to make you a permanent house. You wanted to make me a house, I'm going to make you a house. Okay, so that's part of the promise. And then he says that he is going to his seed that comes out of his bowels, he's going to establish his kingdom. All right, so meaning that one that comes out of his bowels would rule, would reign. Okay, and then that person that comes out of his bowels, he shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Now, like I said before, when you look at 12 and 13, it's either you feel as though this is a dual fulfillment. Solomon fulfilled half, the Messiah is going to fill the other half, or you believe that the Messiah filled or will fulfill all of these. Okay? It will be his father, he will be my son. He talks about what happens if that person or if that seed gets out of line, what's going to happen. He's going to chastise them with the rod of men. And we saw that. We went to First Kings and we saw where that happens. Okay? But he said that his mercy will rest upon that person. And he's not going to take it away. He's not going to take his mercy away. That his mercy will rest upon that person. And then finally, that the house and the kingdom shall be established forever before thee. So when he says the house, he means the house of David is going to be established before forever. Okay, and thy throne shall be established forever. Okay, so that promise, remember, that's not a Judah promise. This is a house of David promise. This is for the lineage of the house of David. All right, let's keep going. Let's go to 2 Samuel 7:16 or 7:18. I'm sorry. Then went King David in and sat before Yahuwah, and he said, "Who am I, O Lord God, and what is my house that thou hast brought me here hitherto? And this was yet a small thing in thy sight, O Lord God, but thou hast spoken also of thy servant's house for a great while to come. And is this the manner of men, O Yahuwah Elohim?" Okay. So David was like amazed. At this point, David's amazed by the promise and saying, like, you've established, you didn't say to me like, oh, this is gonna be a promise for Israel. He personalized this promise for David. And we have to realize that this promise was personalized to David's house and his lineage. So when you do like a comparison, it's very similar to the promise that he made to Abraham. Remember, he blessed Abraham's seed to come. And in this promise, the house of David is receiving that blessing of Abraham. It's receiving that same covenant, that same blessing. And David was beside himself about this blessing, about this covenant that the Most High made with him. Did he make it conditional? Well, what he said to David was, when your seed gets out of line, I'm going to chastise him, but I'm not going to remove my mercy from that person. Okay. So is it conditional? In some aspects it's conditional, but for the most part, this is a promise that he made to David's lineage. All right. So when you look at the components of a covenant, let's look at the components of a covenant. All right. So when you establish a covenant, a lot of times you have, first you have, the terms of the covenant. And I think we kind of went through what the terms of the covenant was. Then you also have, sometimes you'll have a blood sacrifice in there. Okay. So we don't see that at this point, a blood sacrifice. All right. After that, a blood sacrifice, sometimes you'll see the agreement. And, if we go down deeper, you can see where David is. He's in agreement. David's amazed, but he's in agreement with what the Most High is saying. Also, when you look at a covenant, there's witnesses. Who was the witness? Nathan was the witness, okay? Nathan was the witness. And Nathan came to him as the witness, okay? So you have a witness of this covenant. But this is like I would say this is probably part one of this covenant. And very surface level, I kind of wanted to do an overview of this covenant. I didn't really get too deep. I wanted to kind of stay on the surface to kind of give you a sense for what this covenant was that was made with David, and how this covenant kind of differed from the other covenants, and how this covenant was very similar to the covenant that he made with Abraham. I intend to, do some more with this, because I think, when you start to get into it, I want to go to First Chronicles, and I want to cover the account from First Chronicles, because the account is very similar, and there's some variances, some differences in the account from First Chronicles. So I want to, go back, and I want to start it from First Chronicles, and then I want to compare and contrast Second Samuel, and then First Chronicles, and then really lay out the elements of the covenant. But I say shalom to all of you. Thank you for your attention. Um, you know, David, we are we are moving into we are moving into a new order, and we're moving into realizing David's covenant. Um, I believe that we are not only the people, we are not only Judah, but I believe we are of the house of David. And I believe that we are moving into that point in time where we're being waken up and shown who we are. So not only are we Israel, not only are we Judah, but we are David's house. And it's important for us to walk in that anointing, and to know that the Most High has something special for us. And with that, I'll say shalom.